the core of the event, the conversation between Kate and our Vice President for Tourism, Gilberto Salcedo. Then again, we're going to include our partners from Wildlife Worldwide in the conversation, and then we're going to open up for some Q&A. So just to provide you with a bit of information, some of you or many of you know Kate, of course. Kate is a British journalist. She has mainly worked for the BBC as a narrator and television presenter, specialized in wildlife and scientific programs and TV shows, with an amazing experience, and has traveled around the world and covered many places looking for wildlife. Gilberto Salcedo is the Vice President for Tourism in ProColombia. So he leads one of our main lines of business, promoting Colombian tourism abroad, and has more than 18 years of experience in the public and private sector in different industries. We're going to be talking also with Rob Smith. Rob is the UK, works for Wildlife Worldwide, and he's the expert on the ground in Colombia for Wildlife Worldwide. And Dan Free, who heads the Wildlife Worldwide team overseeing sales and product development. And both of them were fundamental and instrumental in getting Kate to Colombia and having a very successful visit during her stay. Rob was actually with Kate all along and has and can complement a lot to that experience. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. We have almost 90 people connected already, so it's certainly very exciting to be starting this webinar today. So I'm going to hand over to Gilberto, our Vice President for Tourism, who's going to lead and moderate the conversation with Kate and our partners from Wildlife Worldwide. Thank you very much, everyone. And Gilberto, over to you.
Thank you, Jose. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to welcome you all and to our special guest, Kate Humble. Kate, thank you. Thank you for being here with us and dedicate some time to talk about Colombia. It is a great honor to have you in this webinar. At the same time, tell me.
It's a pleasure. It would be more fun if we were all sitting around in Bogota, but I guess this is the next best thing.
I know. Well, at the same time, I would like to greet and thank Rob Smith and Dan Free from Wildlife Worldwide for joining us. I will start, as Jose said, providing some context and highlighting some points about why sustainability is key for the tourism that we are promoting in Colombia. Well, I would like to start talking about the importance of sustainability for tourism. First, well, tourism is one of the most beneficial sectors for a country, generating employment, including local communities in the productive chain, creating consciousness on the need to preserve the natural and cultural heritage of destinations in order to visit them, generating a complete positive virtual circle. However, we cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that this sector also has some negative externalities, which must be combated through governance and awareness. Some of these negative externalities are, first, tourism contributes to the generation of between 5 and 8% of the greenhouse gases that have a direct impact on climate change. Second, tourists consume up to 25% more energy than locals. Third, tourism represents around 5% of total water consumption worldwide. During trips, tourists consume up to 4 times more water than residents. And finally, only 30 to 60% of the total solid wastes are collected. 12 to 30% of global food waste is carried out by hotels. On the other hand, we have Colombia and the privilege of being one of the most biodiverse spots in the world. Costas Chris, an expert of the United States, said that we are a kind of a Noah's Ark. So some facts about it. We are number one in birds and orchids, number two in diversity of plants, amphibians, fish, and butterflies. We are number three in reptiles and palm trees. We are number four in diversity of mammals. We are number six in hydric sources, and we are among 15 countries with the largest area of vegetable coverage. In addition, in the competitiveness index for travel and tourism, Colombia in position 19 of out 140 in the natural resource segment, which indicates the enormous natural heritage the country has, and which has to be used in a sustainable way in order to preserve it. In this sense, and in order to seek greater sustainability in tourism sector in Colombia, the need for the implementation of sustainability policy has been identified. In general terms, this policy would aim to enhance the environmental management of the tourism value chain in Colombia, to improve its sustainability and competitiveness, promoting the conservation and use of the natural heritage and generating added value for the country. This policy is being structured under the leadership of the Vice Ministry of Tourism and is estimated to be launched in August of 2020. Well, I also would like to emphasize the relevance of sustainable tourism in this new scenario, in this COVID-19 scenario. Well, during the pandemic, the need of promoting more sustainable tourism has become evident. The main challenges to be faced are position sustainability as a fundamental pillar for development of tourism and competitive factor for tourism business. Generate a perception of co-responsibility among tourism service providers so that they assume their role in mitigating the negative externalities of tourism. Adopt a strategic and long-term vision of the sector. Promote tourism based on the best international practices. Well, after this brief introduction of tourism in Colombia and how sustainability is key for the country, both in the current scenario and in the long term, I would like to introduce Kate Humble, who had the opportunity of visiting Colombia recently and will share some of her experience and insights. Kate, welcome again. Your turn.
Thank you. Well, I should give you, I guess, a little bit of background. Why Colombia? As Gilberto said, I've been very lucky in my career and also in my private life. I've always been somebody who has loved travel, who has been very curious about the world, and it is, I think, one of the most exciting things about our planet is that it seems that there are infinite things to explore close to home and further afield. And because I think I've always been interested in wildlife and in wild places, in places that perhaps aren't so established on the tourist map, Colombia was very high on my list to visit. And in fact, about 12 years ago, I planned with my husband to do quite a long trip to Colombia, possibly take bicycles. I'm quite glad it didn't happen because I now know how hilly it is. But we did think that we might take bikes and cycle around Colombia. And we didn't do it because actually we moved house and we moved to Wales, where I live now. And so Colombia kind of got, our plans for Colombia got shelved, but my wish to go there didn't. And the opportunity arose, as Gilberto said, for me to go to Colombia earlier this year. I have worked a lot with Dan at Wildlife Worldwide, and we have been discussing, trips to Colombia. Now, Dan's been running trips to Colombia for some time. It is, again, as Gilberto said, if you're a birder, it is the most extraordinary country. You are not going to tick off every single bird in Colombia in one trip. You're not going to tick off every single bird in a lifetime, because there are, well, 1,800 recorded species. That's right, isn't it, Dan?
It is.
And that's recorded species. And this is, you know, Colombia may not be the biggest country in South America, but it's an incredibly complex country. It is full of different habitats. And partly because of its history, you know, huge areas of it have been quite closed off until very recent times. So, you know, it is this wonderful place just waiting to be explored, which for somebody like me is impossibly enticing. And so Dan and I actually talked about a trip that could be, could combine birds, but also some of the very exciting mammals that are, you know, if you're lucky, you can get to see there. And there were two on my kind of wish list, if you like. I didn't make anybody's life easy. I didn't go, you know, howler monkeys, which I kind of trip over. I thought, well, I'd like to see a mountain tapir. I have seen, you know, the kind of regular tapirs in the wild, and I've also worked with them here in the UK. I used to work with a slightly stroppy tapir who, when he was in a bad mood, if you tickled him under his elbow, he'd roll over. But obviously I wasn't expecting quite that sort of encounter with a mountain tapir, but I thought that would be a pretty good animal to see. And for any of you listening to this, if you have never seen a mountain tapir, do a quick Google now, because they are gorgeous looking. They look like they've got big white lipstick on, and they're just these, you know, they're just fantastically, almost mythical looking creatures. The other animal that was, I mean, I said, I wanted to challenge Dan, and I said, you know, spectacle bear. A spectacle bear is something that, you know, everyone in their life should at least try to see. And so that was really our kind of our wish list, along with, you know, anything else that happened to pop up as we were walking past. And so just to add to the challenge, I didn't have very long. I only had 10 days. So it was going to be a bit of a short trip. But it started with flight into Bogota, and then immediately on to a short flight onto a place called Pereira, which is kind of in the center of the country, kind of between two sort of fingers of the Andes, if you like, and very beautiful setting. Not that we really spent a great deal of time there, but it's it has very, very good coffee. If you're a coffee drinker, you want to hang out in Pereira. And but from there we then drove, just an aside, anyone listening who likes cycling, go to Colombia, everyone is on a bike. We were there. I arrived on a Sunday morning, and literally we were driving up to this area, this wilderness area, national park just north of Pereira, and I've never seen so many bicycles in my life. And so we inched our way past all these cyclists, and we were heading for the Otom Quimbaya. Have I said that vaguely correctly? Spanish speakers, thank you.
Quimbaya.
Thank you very much, Jose. And but that was the reserve that we were heading for, and it is sort of a really beautiful area of. Now I'm going to have to get this right, Rob, who was with me. Is it secondary forest or is it primary forest, that area? Oh, he's frozen. I've bored him. Stupid. Rob, wake up.
Rob. He froze.
It's a mosaic. Sorry, we're on a satellite connection in the mountains above Bogota, so things are a little bit slow sometimes. But it's a bit of a mosaic of primary and secondary, and there's some old Chinese plantations as well, which give it a slightly odd mix. So it's a mixture, and it's all, as Kate knows, on different altitude levels. So lots of different sort of forest types, going up from about 1,000 meters up to 4,000 meters up to the Paramo.
And it's really, it's sort of beautiful forest. Again, anyone who's spent time in rainforest knows that it can be quite a claustrophobic experience, actually. But this forest is kind of open enough, and it is literally hopping, chirping, squawking with bird life. We were going to stay and did stay in a small lodge that's actually community run. And, you know, something that Gilberto said in the introduction about the importance of sustainability. One of the things that I really appreciated about this trip that I did was that we stayed in community run places, in small places where, you know, our money was basically going direct to support those communities. So this felt like we were contributing rather than damaging the areas that we were going to. So we stayed in this small community lodge, beautifully run, lovely, very simple rooms, beautiful gardens. And as we were walking to put our bags in our room, Rob said to me, oh, have a look in that tree, Kate. There's a bird in there. It's called a guan. And I said, oh yeah, gosh, that's an amazing looking bird. And he went, yeah, everyone thought that was extinct until 2015. And this bird was kind of it was at eye height, just kind of looking at me. And this unbelievably no one ever sees it bird was practically having breakfast alongside us, you know, and we saw them all the time. And there's another bird that if you're a birder, everybody wants to see. And it is it's a very showy, is it actually a member of the crow family, or do they call it a crow because it's mainly black?
The red ruff fruit crow is a member of the Candinga family.
So it is this.
No.
It's not a corvid basically, but it is called a red ruff fruit crow, and it is this very, you know, it is, if you're from the UK, it kind of looks like a crow that has got into somebody's dressing up box. It's just this glorious thing. And again, if you're a birder, Dan will back me up on this. It's like right up there, isn't it, Dan, as a bird you want to see? I mean, we couldn't get away from them. They're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So, you know, within literally 2 minutes of arriving, we ticked off, you know, the kind of the bird top 10. We were just sort of ticking them off as we went. We had a very funny experience because we didn't even have time for a cup of the famous coffee because somebody said, oh, someone's just spotted a tapir on the road. And I have to confess, I was a tiny little bit disappointed because I was like, can't be that easy. That's like, you know, that's like going to a zoo. Anyway, so we go out and we're on this dirt road kind of in the forest, and we all split up and go and find this tapir that apparently is around. Anyway, it obviously heard that you know, I wanted to see it a lot and disappeared. Or maybe it thought that, oh well, you know, if she's disappointed, let's make her work a little bit harder. So didn't see the tapir, did see howler monkeys that put on a beautiful show for us. And then what followed really then was sort of 3 days on the trail of the mountain tapir, and we moved further up the mountain into the reserve. There's another really lovely place to stay, again very simple but in the most incredible setting, and it takes about well, we were quite speedy, weren't we, Rob? It took us about 2.5 hours to get up there, doing some serious birding on the way. And you know, I was quite excited about the prospect of seeing a tapir until I was introduced by Rob to literally the coolest bird in the world. I mean, I thought my favourite bird was a lark, a skylark. I love a skylark. I know they're brown, but you know, they sing and they make you really happy in February when there's nothing to be happy about. And then we were standing on a bridge looking over. There was this incredibly fast flowing river. I mean, a torrent. I mean, it was a torrent. And we were looking because sometimes you see the tapir coming down through the forest into the river, onto the riverbanks to cross over. And suddenly I thought I could see something in the water. I was like, this thing, whatever it is, has obviously been swept down the stream and is dead and is just being kind of chucked about in the rocks and in this kind of foaming water. Not a bit of it. This little thing pops its head up and paddles up onto a rock. And Rob said, "Oh, that's a torrent duck." Again, if you're on Google, look one up. They are
Very cool.
gorgeous. I mean, they are now my new favorite bird of all time. They're just incredible. I mean, guans are cool, but these are cooler. And we watched this pair of torrent ducks literally just diving in amongst the rocks and in amongst the torrenting, foaming water, as if they were just kind of a couple of kids playing in a waterfall. It was completely wonderful. Anyway, we get up to the top of this reserve and or the top of this track, and we and then head sort of out of the forest. There are these sort of 3 open grassy areas where again we hoped we would see tapir, because it's good, you know, foraging ground for them. They come out of the forest and kind of eat on the fringes of the tree, on the sort of grass that fringes the trees. And you know, there's a reason that Colombia is full of trees and full of vegetation and full of wildlife. It does know how to rain there. And we experienced proper rain. It was amazing. And I know you're thinking, why would anyone go somewhere to get rained on? But there's something about being kind of immersed in this incredible environment. It just being, you know, we were surrounded by these incredible trees, the smell of the earth. We've got there on foot, so you know we've walked three hours, a bit more. So you really feel like you've earned being where you are. And then, you know, this incredible thunder and lightning and this incredible rain, and we just sort of hunkered in under a tree just to wait it out, thinking, well, this is good, because after rain, you know, that's when you often see quite a lot of wildlife activity, whether it's tapir you're looking for, or birds or primates. So we're thinking, great, we'll just sit here soaked to the skin, because the tapirs will come skipping out the minute that the rain stops. Did they come skipping out? No, they didn't. And they didn't skip out at all, did they, Rob? I mean, we were willing these animals to appear. And we spent 2 or 3 days up there. And I have to say, although I would love to have seen a tapir, we didn't see them up there. And that's wildlife viewing for you. I've got a tractor outside the window. Can anyone still hear me, or shall I shut the window? You're okay?
That's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. No worries.
And that is one of the things I think about going to a place that feels really, I think the word is authentic. You know, you can't go to a destination like Colombia, you know, which has this, as I say, this incredible range of habitat, some of it quite challenging, and think, oh, I'm definitely going to see everything. What you're definitely going to do is have a really true immersive experience of what it's like to be in these particular habitats. And if you live in the UK, there is nothing like where I was in the UK. There's nothing that comes close to that feeling of vast space, of just huge. There were areas that sometimes you come up into a clearing in the trees and you just look out, and there's just this incredible kind of rugged ridges and peaks, and they're covered in trees. And then as you look ever higher, Rob mentioned the Paramo, and the Paramo are these high altitude grasslands, which I'll come on to because we spent some time up there as well. But you know, it's like this sort of glorious patchwork quilt of habitat, and it is just hopping hopping with wildlife. Just some of it doesn't quite hop the way that you hope it will right in front of you. So the tapir eluded me. There was one morning, our final morning, and Rob and I said, right, we're not going to be beaten by this. We are going to see this animal. And we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we went out to this spot that we thought that we're definitely going to see them. Without doubt, we are going to be rewarded. And we waded literally thigh high in swamp, because, you know, that's what tapirs like. So we thought, well, we'll just join them. So we're thigh high in swamp, wading across, and we hear this wonderful, wonderful sound. I'm not sure how your tapir impression was quite good.
It's a kind of whistle,
yeah,
and a kind of squeaky whistle.
It is like it's a really sweet sound, isn't it? It's a sort of, I'll try it. It's sort of it's a little bit like the clangers. If anyone remembers the clangers, it's a little bit, there's something soup dragony about the call of a tapir. Anyway, we hear this sound coming from the forest, and we just think, it's there. So we're literally, as I say, thigh deep in swamp and standing, and then we kind of hide. Rob's, you know, sort of further down the swamp, hiding in one bush, and I'm hiding in another, and it's drizzling a bit, and there are quite a lot of insects, and, you know, it's incredibly early in the morning, and there's this, you know, mythical creature whistling in the woods, and I remember thinking there with my binoculars to my face, I remember thinking, why am I loving this so much? You know, if you take the separate parts, I'm being rained on, I'm up to my thighs in swamp, there are mosquitoes, and there's a whistling creature that I can't see. Why is this so much fun? And I was literally, my face was aching. I was smiling so much because it was just a totally magical place to be. And there was no one else there. And that, I think, was the thing that really struck me, and you know, in comparison to some of the places that I've been, some of the places that are more on the map, is that we were in this astonishing environment with, you know, listening to the sound, even if we didn't get a glimpse of it, listening to the sound of an amazing animal, an entirely wild animal, and there was no one else. We had that entire swamp to ourselves at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I felt incredibly lucky. So we had to give up on the tapir, which in a way I'm not that sorry about, because it gives me a jolly good excuse to go back and try and find one again. But we then had to move on to the spectacled bear, and that involved going back to Bogota and to an extraordinary national park called Chingaza, which is literally kind of 40 minutes drive from Bogota. So you've got this, you know, big bustling city full of, I have to say, they can cook in Bogota. There's some good restaurants there. So we had an amazing dinner, and then headed up to Chingaza to stay in another community-run lodge up there. And this time we're thinking, well, we didn't get the tapir, so we are definitely going to get the bear, because that's how these trips work, you know, and you basically get paid back for your, you know, for your sort of dogged determination. And if you have never been to a sort of an area of Paramo, and I've seen it a bit, but never really. I don't think, when I got to Chingaza, I thought, actually, I don't think I have ever seen anywhere like this. It's breathtaking. And as Rob will tell you, there was one morning that we went out, the first morning we were there, and we went out before it got light, and we drove up to a point. And if you're looking for spectacled bear, this sounds like an odd thing, but they feed on this plant. It looks like a big kind of spiky sort of succulent-y type thing. I don't think it is very succulent, but it's incredibly spiky. It's got these sort of black thorns on it, and the bears kind of rip it up. They've got these huge claws, and they rip it up and they eat the juicy bit at the bottom, and then kind of chuck out the rest. They've got terrible table manners, and it's actually rather brilliant for people like me trying to see them, because you may not see a bear, but what you can spot are the very white bases of these sort of discarded leaves. So you can actually spot where a bear has had its breakfast, and where a bear has had its breakfast, you hope it's not going to be too far away. So that's kind of how you track them. So we'd gone to this area where we knew that there were a lot of these plants, and we hoped that we might see some very kind of white bits dotted on the hillside. And we're waiting for the sun to come up. And I walked out to a ridge and looked out, and I mean, I am a bit of a crier, but this landscape just brought tears to my eyes. It was so beautiful, and there was just, it was cloud in between the valleys. You're up. I mean, it's just this. It's this combination of mountain and cloud, and this wonderful kind of sculpting green landscape around you, and then the birds start. The bird song starts to come up as the sun comes up, and you just think, why would I want to be anywhere else in the world? Actually, it was magnificent. However, we didn't find any bear's breakfast, and we spent a very, very long time looking for bear's breakfast, bear's lunch, bear's dinner, bear's midnight snack. No luck. But we did see some incredible birds, along with so there's a hummingbird. Jose said that, or Gilberto said that Colombia is well known for its hummingbirds. It has got the most extraordinary number of hummingbirds, and there's a sort of group of hummingbirds called helmet crests, and there are three. There's the correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. There's the Buffy helmet crest.
Yeah.
And then there's the green. And then there's the blue. That's right, isn't it?
There's the green bearded helmet crest and the blue bearded helmet crest.
The blue bearded.
Yeah.
So the blue bearded is practically mythical, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it hasn't been seen forever, and more of that later, because we're scheming. But hardly, and seeing a green bearded helmet crest is quite a treat, is it not, Rob?
It's always a treat, yeah.
Always a treat. Anyway, so we didn't see a bear on our first morning, but we did see and get amazing views of a green bearded helmet crest. Again, look it up. It's absolutely glorious. It looks like it's been kind of designed by an artist. We saw wonderful birds. We saw, rather tantalizingly, the tracks of puma. And we did see, eventually we started finding these kind of white remains of a bear's breakfast. And we did some incredible walking. It's a beautiful area for walking. So we did some incredible walking. But by the time it got to our last morning, yet again, we're thinking, oh, we're not going to see these bears. So we went out, we found bear breakfast. We're walking around, we're looking, and suddenly we spot this dark shape on a ridge. I run every now and then just to try and, stay fittish and be able to fit into my clothes. I literally would have broken a land speed record at this point. Rob and I just ran down the road and thought, right, can we cut in through this bit of vegetation? And we're making our way across this sort of wonderful grassland. And there, sitting on a ridge, basically ignoring us, is the most magnificent bear. And then we're like, hang on a minute, there's more than one. And she had 2 cubs with her. And we sat for 45 minutes, probably, and just watched this mother bear and her cubs, and they just couldn't care less that we were there. Again, this was I think the wonderful thing about being in a place that, you know, there was no one there with us. You know, we hardly saw anybody for the whole time that we were there. We just felt so lucky that we had this private meeting, this private encounter with just an amazing animal, in a way that felt entirely natural, and in a way that felt entirely that we weren't encroaching on her and on her space. And the other wonderful thing about being in the Paramo, as I said, there's lots of cloud, and you get these wonderful kind of shifting cloud patterns. And at one point the cloud came down and obscured the bear, and we thought, well maybe that's it. And we kind of moved around to see if we could get a view, and we couldn't. And then about, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes later, the cloud lifted and she wasn't there anymore. We're like, oh, we've lost her, she's gone. And then suddenly we spotted her again, and her cubs were moving out through this kind of thicket of vegetation down a river, and the cubs were messing around and climbing trees, and their mum, you know, it was almost like she was sort of standing with her hands on her hips saying, now come on kids, you know, we've got to go and find our next meal. And it was just the most wonderful experience. So having spent 12 years, and more, but having spent the last 12 years thinking it would be really lovely to go to Colombia, now I'm going to be spending, you know, every day, I think, coming up with schemes of how I can go back. And you know, I've got to see a tapir. I've got to now see a blue-bearded helmet crest, a green one, and then stuff. You know, and there's quite a lot else to see too.
Kate, thank you. I had a lot of questions here with me, but I didn't want to interrupt you, because it was fascinating to hear you and how passionate you are about our country and our nature. So I just want to ask you something. Okay, we know that you when you left the school, you had the opportunity to travel around Africa and countless destinations. How do you compare your experience in Colombia with that other travel experience you might have had? How was it?
Ooh, well, as I say, I think one of the things that makes Colombia very interesting and enticing for me is that it is still a relatively new destination. I mean, it sounds mad because obviously it's not a new country, but it has, as we know, it has had a challenging and difficult history. It hasn't been somewhere that people have naturally thought of as a destination to go on holiday. So that has happened quite recently. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly from my experience, it feels that Colombia has because you've been able to see how other countries have done things right or done things wrong, you know, it feels like you've actually been able to learn from and take good, not good advice, but, you know, take on board some of the things that allow Colombia to be a destination that still feels new and fresh, and isn't ever going to allow itself to become, you know, kind of become a mass tourism destination. And I think that's the thing that for me that's exciting about it, is that it still feels like a kind of new, fresh destination. And that things like the wildlife trips, I mean, partly because you haven't got, you know, huge choices of places to stay. There aren't great big glitzy hotels. You can't take in big groups to go and see birds or tapir or whatever it is. So you do get this feeling of exclusivity. And I mean, this might be the wrong thing to say, but one of the things that I find difficult about the way that some tourism in Africa has gone is that it's almost become more about the kind of the lodges and the luxury that you can get in remote locations, then it's become about the wildlife and about the fact that you're somewhere incredibly, you're in an incredibly special habitat. For me, African wildlife, I have to confess, it's often a lot easier to see because you might be seeing it in savannah, in open areas. You're not dealing with forest and that kind of thing. But I think, sometimes you're either battling with an awful lot of other people there. There's lots of people. You go to some of the more popular national parks in Africa, and there will be, a lot of people there. And as I say, what seemed a real treat in Colombia was having these amazing places and these amazing encounters. Pretty much to myself. So as I say, I think it's not a destination that I would say people who really just, they want to see an animal quickly and easily and then go and do lots of shopping. I wouldn't say Colombia is that sort of destination, but if you are somebody who really loves wildlife, really loves the idea of being somewhere that, as I say, feels quite unspoilt and authentic, somewhere where you feel that your travel actually counts and can contribute to a local economy. And by local economy, I mean a really local economy and to communities, then it's hard to beat, really.
Thank you, Kate. I love what you said about that our luxury is not based on the properties that we have here in the hotels, but we have our luxury is our nature. So,
yeah.
So I agree totally with it. Well, before we go with Dan, I would like to ask you something else. After your visit to Colombia, what would you recommend us? What we can do better here? About the natural experience, the tourist based on nature?
Gosh, I feel I'm not entirely sure that I'm qualified after one trip to be able to say that. And it, genuinely, it was an extraordinary trip, and it did exceed my expectations. I suppose the challenge for people like Dan and Rob, and maybe if there are other tour operators who are listening in to this, is the level of the level of accommodation, because some of the accommodation is very, very basic, and not everybody wants to stay in a place where you might have to share a room if it's only a dormitory room, or you can't have your own bathroom. I mean, to me, that's kind of worth it, because you are going to somewhere that, is a bit off the beaten track, and you have the potential to see some really extraordinary species. But if you want, it's also not a cheap destination to go to. So I think, for tour operators, being able to, for you, the sort of tourism part of the government, to be able to give training and investment and support, I think, to communities, because I think most people going to a destination like Colombia are really going to want to support community tourism, and it's clearly on your agenda as well. And if there were a way of just enabling those communities, and not every community, but some of them, have had less contact with tourism than others. So I think being able to give some sort of training and support and information, because unless you've traveled yourself, you don't really know what funny foreigners want. And I think, it would be really helpful for those community places. I don't think it's enormous amounts of money that need to be spent, but I think it's just explaining, as I say, what these funny foreigners expect. And it doesn't have to be, you know, 4 hot showers a day, and it doesn't have to be, you know, kind of towels rolled up in the shape of swans on the end of the bed. It doesn't have to be any of that stuff. But I think just being able to help them raise the level of accommodation just a little bit, I think that will allow, I mean, Dan, chip in here, because you know, you know your customers much better than me, but I feel that would be the thing that might put people off going to Colombia, is just that there isn't quite the level of facilities that they would look for.
Yeah, I think Rob can obviously contribute here as well, but I think that there's a good number of kind of lodges that have been used for birding trips in the past that do kind of fulfill that criteria, and they're very comfortable. The food is good, the lovely settings and stuff, and they're very well run. But what you've done here is gone on probably one of the most challenging trips possible, really. It really is kind of pioneering stuff, kind of trying to go after the mammals, and the 2 locations that you went to, the accommodation options were very simple, you know, and what we would normally do is probably do like a few nights at one of those, and then somewhere more comfortable for a few nights, and balance it out, and then go back into that kind of environment, because we really want to position yourselves, you know, in the best place to see those animals. And this really is, you know, kind of these areas that ecotourism here is in its infancy. So it has got a way to go. And certainly I think if you could make those places a little bit more comfortable, that would be brilliant. But it's not necessarily the case across Colombia, I think, in some of their, you know, areas. Rob, I don't know if you can chip in at all, mate.
Yeah, I totally agree, Dan. And I would say we have a tour with, it's under the Traveling Naturalist brand, which is a birding tour, which visits more comfortable lodges, but that tour's principally birding. With your tour, Kate, we just didn't have the time to get you to luxury lodges. I think if we had when you come back, we'll have to go.
I don't want the luxury lodge. You know, I frankly, the opportunities that I had to see the animals I'd have slept under the car. But, you know, it is just thinking about, you know, that kind of, it is such a bewitching destination. It has so much to offer. But it would be a shame if it excluded people who would love it and get a great deal out of it, if they just felt, you know, actually, I'd love to go, but I would like to have my own bathroom or whatever. I mean, it sounds so. Yeah. I think the thing is, Gilberto, is that, you know, there isn't a great deal I can think of based on my one trip that I would change or improve. I mean, something that was really impressive, I felt, was the level of guiding. I mean, you know, we worked with Rob with a young birding guide who was astonishing. I mean, not only was his birding knowledge just brilliant, he spoke English better than I did, and you know, so and then guides that we had in Chingaza, similarly, you know, there are really good, knowledgeable people on the ground, and also the I mean, and again, Rob and Dan can probably talk more about this, but from my experience, just, you know, excellent drivers, you know, good, safe vehicles, all those kind of, they're boring things, but they are considerations, and important. And so there's really good kind of basic infrastructure there that allows to do, as Dan said, you know, a trip like mine, which is a bit pioneering and a bit off the beaten track. And you know, I was surprised at the, you know, at the standard of guiding, and as I say, of drivers and that kind of thing. Not because I don't think there are going to be good drivers and good guides in Colombia, but as you said, this is an industry in its infancy, and to have that sort of level, I think was really impressive.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Very important for us to know these all the details and the boring details in this kind of experiences. So, well, I just want to do the final question. Kate, tell us about the next trip to Colombia. What are you planning? Where's the
Well, I don't know, Dan. Am I allowed to sort of mention what we might have up our sleeve?
Yeah, do it. Absolutely.
Please
Okay,
do so.
well, so Dan and Rob and Rob's wife Claudia, we've all three been scheming because I was so taken by my trip there, and there are, as well as an astonishing number of bird species in Colombia, there are some very exciting primates, and so Rob and Claudia and I, when I think possibly we were celebrating about the bear, and we were going, okay, what can we do next? And then we were emailing Dan, going, what do you think? What do you think? Could we do a primate trip? And so at the moment, we are in the midst of putting together an itinerary to see primates in kind of it's sort of 3 different areas, really, isn't it, Dan? Is that right?
It's probably best for Rob to comment on this. I'm still waiting for the itinerary.
Are you still waiting? Rob, come on! I want to get this trip.
There we go, Rob.
It's several sites, mostly sites that are the sort of the intersection between the Andes and Amazonia, and in these areas. That sort of intersection of mountains and the Amazonian lowlands have sort of been a catalyst for speciation. So you have a number of endemic primates and rare primates along those boundaries. So it's really a big traverse of the whole country, right from the far south into some central eastern parts, and then into some northern areas as well. So it's an exciting itinerary. More pioneering stuff.
Great, thank you for sharing. Well, Jose, I don't know if you want to give some questions of our audience. So please go ahead.
Great, Gilberto. Thank you so much, and Kate, thanks so much for sharing with us your really truly inspiring story and experience in Colombia. We've had lots of questions from the audience. Some you've dealt with already, such as what would you do to improve or up our game, a little bit about your next trip. There's one though that I think it's relevant in terms of information and part of the boring part for you, and probably for Dan and Rob as well, a little bit about connectivity. So how easy was it to get to Colombia, and how easy was it to get from Bogota to the different destinations that you visited, Pereira, Otún, Chingaza? You mentioned a little bit about Chingaza and its proximity to Bogota, but those practicalities would probably be useful for the audience.
Well, for the trip that I did, it was sort of relatively contained, partly because as I said, I only had quite a short time. I only had 10 days. I flew with Avianca, with the national airline, so it's a direct flight from the UK, very straightforward flight. And then I went straight to Pereira. There wasn't a very long layover, and the Pereira flight from Bogota is like 40 minutes. It's not, it's under an hour. And from there, the drive up to where we hope to see the mountain tapir was maybe another hour and a half, Rob, roughly. Was it that, I think?
Yeah, it would be about that. We had to fight a little bit of traffic through Pereira, but it's not a long journey.
Yeah. So actually, to get from the UK to the heart of a Colombian forest was amazingly straightforward and quite quick. And then from the return journey that we did was Pereira back to Bogota, again that straightforward, very short flight. And then the drive to Chingaza was less than an hour. So that trip that I did, the connectivity was very straightforward because we were in a relatively well-traveled and well-connected part of the country. There are other parts of the country that are, I know from conversations that we've had about, particularly about this, you know, the possibility of doing this primate itinerary, that are more challenging, but all possible, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with Colombia is it's a country the size of France and Germany combined. It's huge. So you can do a short itinerary as we did with relatively short journeys, or you can do longer, more adventurous trips. You've got vastways of Amazonia, the Llanos, which is like a tropical savanna habitat. There's 3 branches of the Andes. There's the Caribbean coast, the Pacific coast. So there's a huge diversity of opportunity for wildlife travel here. So you can really, I know Wildlife Worldwide do a lot of tailor-made trips. So if you wanted to, you could design an itinerary really based around your own, your own wish list, and also your own sort of limitations in terms of, you know, long journeys and flights and things.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Kate. I think we've almost run out of time. You've all been really strict with the time, so thank you so much. And I would like just to thank everyone for attending the webinar. It's been an amazing experience to talk to you, Kate, and to listen to your to just see your passion about Colombia, to learn that you have now planned a new trip. So once the skies are open, we're going to be glad to have you there once again. So really glad to know that you have that in mind, and also very glad to know that the coolest bird that Kate Humble has seen in her life has been in Colombia. That is certainly a phrase that we're gonna use. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Dan, Robin, thank you so much for partnering up with us to make this not just today, but taking Kate to Colombia particularly. It's been amazing working with you, and I'm sure that there's going to be a chance to continue working together in the future. So I don't know, Dan, Rob, Gilberto, and Kate, if you want to give some just closing remarks to say goodbye to our very inspired audience.
I just want to say thank you for everyone, and really, Kate, you are maybe one of our best ambassadors. So thank you very much.
Well, I didn't do anything. Colombia does it all by itself, to be honest.
I'd just like to say a big thank you to ProColombia, who made this trip happen along with Wildlife Worldwide. It was a real pleasure having Kate over here, a great travel companion, and just an awesome trip. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to our colleagues both in Bogota and London that were behind the scenes and allowed that the webinar worked technically amazingly well. So thanks everyone. It was a pleasure having you here, and let's see each other again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks everyone in the audience. I should just leave meeting. Yeah.
Bye, Kate.
Bye, Juliana.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure. And we'll keep in touch.
Definitely.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Juliana.
Guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
Bob.
Kate.
Talk soon.
Ciao, Juliana. Muchas gracias.
Ciao. Gracias.
Ciao.
Talk soon.
Absolutely, Kate. Yeah, thanks so much for that. That was fantastic, and you did a super job.
Good job.
The passion and everything is brilliant. You know, it's good listening to you.
I made it all up, obviously. It was a real pleasure, and I can't. Well, let's work on those primates, Smith.
Yes, absolutely,
yeah,
Robson.
please tell me my internet connection dropped out when I did that tried to do that Tapir impression. Please tell me the internet had dropped out. Thank God for that.
Right.
Right, my dears, I've
We'll
got to
see you
go.
later, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Absolutely.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, buddy.
Bye.
Thanks, Kate. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too. Oh, don't know how to do this. Leave me too.
Good job, Kate. That was awesome.